the day we returned all our names. In a quiet, almost forgotten town, nestled deep within valleys, where time seemed to slow to a mere crawl, names weren't simply given at birth. No, in this peculiar place, names were meticulously borrowed. They were not an inherent part of one's being, not a birthright etched into the soul, but rather a transient garment, carefully selected, worn and then discarded with the changing seasons of life. Imagine, if you will, the bustling scene at the town registry. It was not a place for antiquated birth certificates or celebratory marriage licenses, but a central hub, a veritable marketplace for the temporary rental of identities. People, their faces etched with a complex blend of hesitant, hope and weary resignation, would dutifully line up sometimes for hours, stretching down the cobblestone street and around the worn corners of buildings. Each individual waited their turn with a quiet, almost reverent anticipation, eager to rent a name, to don it like a newly acquired, perhaps desperately needed coat, and in some quiet, often melancholic way to try and make it truly, authentically fit. The weight of this aspiration hung heavy in the air, a collective yearning for a perfect match. Some names, grand and resonant, seemed to hum, with the echoes of ancient lineages, promising a destiny, too vast, too monumental, for the humble shoulders of the borrower to bear. These names, though alluring, often proved to be a crushing burden, an identity too large to inhabit comfortably. Others, conversely, were too small, too plain, or simply egregiously wrong, chafing and constricting the spirit, never quite settling into a comfortable, harmonious embrace. There was the hushed, almost mournful whisper of a woman, her hands gnarled and strong from years of labor, trying on Evelyn, a name that felt far too delicate, too fragile for her robust, hard-working nature. Or the deep, guttural sigh of a burly man accustomed to quiet contemplation, attempting to embody Maximilian, a moniker that felt far too bold, too assertive for his gentle, unassuming stride. Each name, regardless of its grandeur or simplicity, represented a temporary masquerade, a fleeting illusion of belonging, a hopeful experiment in self-definition. The hope was always there, a tiny flickering flame, that this name, this time, would be the one that finally clicked into place, making them feel whole. One particular day, as the late afternoon sun, a tired golden orb, cast long, melancholic shadows across the ancient, uneven cobblestone square, two strangers found themselves drawn, as if by an invisible thread of fate, into that familiar, somber line. The air, thick with unspoken narratives and the quiet weight of countless past attempts, hummed with a tangible energy around them. One was a man, his frame a testament to years of quiet endurance, his shoulders slightly stooped yet burdened by a name that roared too loudly, too aggressively for his soft, almost hesitant voice. Perhaps it was Victor, a name inherently tied to triumph and conquest, ill-suited for a soul deeply acquainted with a lifetime of quiet defeats and gentle compromises. Or perhaps Lionheart, a title too grand, too audacious for his gentle gaze and introspective demeanor. His eyes held a weariness that spoke volumes of internal conflict, a constant struggle between who he was and the identity he was meant to project. Beside him stood a woman, her eyes holding the profound depth of countless horizons, a silent, eloquent testament to the dozens upon dozens of names she had worn, each one never truly staying, slipping through her fingers like fine, elusive sand. She had known the ephemeral nature of Seraphina, a name too ethereal, too heavenly to properly ground her earthy, practical spirit. And she had felt the fleeting, tantalizing promise of Blanche, a name too pristine, too unblemished, for her adventurous, often chaotic heart. Her posture, though graceful, hinted at a restless spirit, forever seeking, forever moving on. They stood there not to partake in the hopeful ritual of borrowing, but to fulfill the often dreaded act of returning, to shed the ill-fitting, suffocating identities that had served only to obscure, rather than reveal their true, authentic selves. There was a quiet resolve in their movements, a shared understanding that this was the final shedding, the ultimate liberation. Their conversation began slowly, a hesitant, almost accidental dance of shared glances and quiet, understanding sighs. "It never quite fit, did it?" the man murmured, his voice a low, gravelly current, barely audible beneath the distant rhythmic murmur of the town, and the shuffling feet of those still waiting in line. The woman, her gaze meeting his with an uncanny synchronicity, offered a faint, almost imperceptible yet profoundly knowing smile. None of them ever did. Not truly. They were always someone else's echo. As their words intertwined, weaving a delicate tapestry of shared experience, a realization, profound and unsettling in its simplicity, began to dawn upon them both. No name, not a single one, had ever truly fit because none of them were truly, authentically their own. They were nothing more than borrowed costumes, meticulously crafted by others, not an authentic second skin that truly belonged to them. This shared epiphany brought with it a sense of both profound loss and liberating clarity, and then with a silent, almost telepathic mutual understanding that transcended mere words, they did the unthinkable. In a town where names were the very fabric of social interaction, the bedrock of identity, and the foundation of all recognized existence, they simply removed their names, not with a dramatic flourish, not with a defiant declaration broadcast to the entire town, but with the quiet, deliberate, almost sacred act of letting go. They simply resolutely walked away from the registry, unburdened by the weight of expectations, unnamed by the dictates of society. The heavy, often suffocating cloak of borrowed identity was gently lifted, revealing a profound emptiness, yet paradoxically, a boundless potential. For the very first time in their lives, they spoke not from the confines of a borrowed title, not from the echoing, hollow chambers of a designated social role, but from a place far deeper, far more resonant, from the raw, unfiltered tapestry of memory, intricately woven with both profound joy and searing sorrow, from the quiet, inviolable sanctuary of the soul, unmarred by external expectations or superficial labels, from something older, more primordial than identity itself, the very essence of their being, their intrinsic human spirit. It was a rebirth, a reawakening to their true selves. Their act, a single ripple in the otherwise placid pond of the town's established norms, began to stir others. At first it was merely a hesitant glance from those still clinging to their borrowed names. Then a curious, almost whispered question passed from one person to another. Soon a few more, their faces reflecting a newfound glimmer of possibility, a spark of recognition for a truth they had perhaps unconsciously suppressed. The line at the registry, once a perpetual, unchanging fixture, a symbol of endless demand, began to noticeably dwindle. People observing the quiet, profound liberation of the unnamed pair started to ponder the immense, often crushing weight of their own borrowed identities. The grand names, the plain names, the wrong names. They all began to feel a little heavier, a little less authentic, a little more like a burden than a blessing. One by one, the citizens of this quiet town, emboldened by the silent yet powerful revolution that was unfolding before their very eyes, began to follow suit. They too made the brave, difficult decision to remove their names, shedding the layers of expectation, pretense, and inherited meaning that had long defined them. The town, once meticulously defined by its central registry and the constant, almost ritualistic exchange of identities, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to utterly forget names. The sounds of doors opening and closing at the registry, once a daily cacophony, grew quieter, then ceased altogether, replaced by a profound silence. Dust, a silent witness to this monumental shift, settled thickly on the ledgers, the ink within them fading into forgotten histories, becoming mere whispers of a bygone era. And as the names, those formerly indispensable markers of existence, faded entirely from memory, something truly remarkable, truly transformative happened. The town began to remember itself, not as a disjointed collection of borrowed identities, each striving for an ill-fitting purpose, but as a living, breathing, interconnected entity, harmoniously composed of genuine, unadulterated souls. The quiet whispers of resignation became authentic conversations, filled with genuine curiosity and empathy. The hesitant, often guarded glances turned into true, uninhibited connections built on a foundation of shared humanity rather than superficial labels. For when the masks of borrowed names were finally completely shed, the true faces, the unique stories, the raw, unfiltered essence of each individual emerged, vibrant, untamed, and breathtakingly real. The quiet, almost forgotten town, no longer defined by what it called itself, no longer bound by the rigid strictures of borrowed identities, began to truly live, unbound, unfettered, and profoundly remembered, forever changed by the radical act of self-discovery.